My name is Rick Moore, and I'm in charge of Whitecap Publications. I've got to interview today author Tom Frye, who's got some marvelous children's books authored called Fear Slayer, and it's really great. But today I was going to ask you, Tom, some questions about children's books.
Yep.
And I got to ask you, what inspired you to become a children's books author, and how did you get started?
Well, I wrote these stories 30 years ago.
Really?
I worked in the schools for 45 years. I was a gifted mentor. I worked with second graders through seniors, and so I had every grade possible. But I told these as bedtime stories to my niece and my two nephews.
Really?
And, yeah, and they became written. I finally wrote them, and the Fear Slayer story and the Dragonstone story were bedtime stories, and that's how they came about. I didn't start out to write a children's book. I just basically was copying what I wrote, what I told,
Are they two separate stories or a continuation of the first story?
It's a continuation. The boys grow a little more in the story. They become a little more aged, and the first story is all about fear, because that was the big deal back in the day. What's under the bed? What's under the closet? And I remember when I was a kid, there was a red-faced man that ran around our neighborhood, and I was just petrified of him. And my mom didn't believe me that there was a red-faced man, and she went into the store one night. She left me in the car and rolled up all the windows and locked the doors. And he walked over to the car and looked in at me. And I was probably, second grade. And she come out, she had to take me to the hospital and get me a shot because I was...
To calm it down, right?
Yeah, the nurse says, "What's wrong with him?" She goes, "Oh, he's got this wild imagination. First it was the white tigers, and now it's the red-faced man."
If that took place in Detroit, they'd call the red-faced man Nain Rouge.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
It's a devil that comes out every Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember being afraid, and so when I told the story, I incorporated all those fears into it, and the kids were fear slayers. They slew the fear, kind of like a dragon.
That's great, actually.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about your writing process? How did you come up with the ideas for your stories? I mean, honestly, it sounds like you observed the kids and you saw that fear was a big deal for them.
Yeah.
That's how you came up with it. Is that true?
Oh yeah. I write what kids relate to, and I think that's where my secret is that I can be a kid at heart and remember being a kid back in the day and being scared to death, of my own shadow. And my images I see come back to me from all the way back in second grade. I mean, I remember.
Really?
Yeah, when I was sitting in school one day, I had a pencil tray, and I took my pencil and I was poking it in this little tiny, completely round hole in my pencil tray, and all of a sudden I heard a voice say, "No, no!" And I imagined this little mouse crawled out of that hole, and he flew around my room. My classroom in an airplane, and my teacher called my mom, and she says, "He's staring off into space. He just doesn't seem to be with us." So when I got home, my mom says, "What are you looking at?" I says, "Tuffy the mouse." She says, "You need help."
Well, you grew up to be a storyteller, didn't you?
Yeah. All those little knickknacks came together, and I remember on recess time, instead of playing football or basketball, I was always playing Lost in Space.
Now, what do you think is the most important element in a children's book? To answer the question, I mean, honestly, is it your message of overcoming fear?
Yeah, I don't do overhanded with messages in my children's stuff. If there's a message in there, it comes across. I just don't overdo it. With my adolescent stuff, I do. And with that, I don't try to be preachy at all. I just try to leave a message of some type, plant a seed,
Okay.
And I think with the kids, I do the same thing, is just kind of stay low key.
Yeah,
You know?
plant a seed, right?
Yeah, because kids know they're genuine. They know if it's real or not. And so, it comes across whatever I'm trying to convey, and message or not.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to be entertaining though for most. Somebody one time took my all 7 of my books and they said it's edutainment, and I was like, what? And they go, yes, educating and entertaining at the same time. So it's edutainment. I thought, oh, that's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
So the way you share some of your favorite children's books and the messages and the themes is low key. So you're trying to be an entertainer first,
Right.
have a low key message or theme in it, right?
Right.
Because kids really are smart. They pick up on it, right?
Oh yeah. When Tolkien first sent The Hobbit out to I forgot the name of the company. It was in Great Britain, but he sent it to the Unwin. Unwin was Charles Unwin, and Unwin gave it to his 10-year-old son and said, "Read this for me and give me a review." And his 10-year-old son was the one who got The Hobbit published, because
wow.
Yeah, he gave a great review on it. He wrote like 2 paragraphs, and Unwin published it after that. So
I never knew that story. That's great.
Yeah, it's a great story, but I think
so the child could understand his message.
Yeah. And I think entertaining is the most important thing. Not so much leaving a message, but if you got a message in there and it comes through, that's cool, But
right.
I try to be entertaining because you want to capture that kid's attention right away, and if you don't, you lost them. They're not going to read your book.
They won't get any theme or message if they don't read the book, right?
That's right.
Now, do you have a favorite character from your own books? I mean, like Fear Slayers and Dragonstone? And if so, what makes them special to you?
Well, this story started out as Jason the Fear Slayer. It was based on a little kid named Jason. And in the course of time, I've rewritten this book 15 times for parents who had an older brother and a younger brother, and I put their names in the story and published it or printed it that way. And so it's come along to Liam, the Fear Slayer, and Rory now, two little boys who live in Wisconsin, and it's kind of cool because first started with Jason and moved on to Dawson and Carson and all these other names, and they've all been Fear Slayers.
That's great, actually. Maybe make a separate book out of them someday.
Yeah, well, I did a personalized book on each of those, and a lot of the parents paid for them to be printed and perfect bound, and so they made books out of them. It was kind of cool,
Yeah, I guess so.
But I wasn't going to make a living out of that, because replace and find, that just.
Now, do you have a favorite character, right?
Well, yeah. In my the Fear Slayer story, yeah, the main character is my favorite. He's a little boy who overcomes fear in the first story and then goes to a summer camp in the second story. And the summer camp story is based on a program I ran called Castle Land. It was voted number 1 over 32 programs 7 years in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an interactive play. It was an interactive challenge course, and it was a play at the beginning of camp, and the counselors came down and acted out the dragon parts. There were 7 dragons, and the 200 kids were challenged every week to come to Castle Land Grove and pass the 7 trials in order to earn words of power that will defeat these 7 dragons.
How did they react to that?
Oh, they loved it. It was like a football game at the end. I mean, for the opening campfire, I come down with swords, and I got fire on my swords. I got pop bottle rockets shooting off my swords. I use special effects.
What was the age grouping?
7 through 17.
Wow.
And they all got into it. They all came at the same time. There were every week there were about 200 kids every week, and they about 10 at a time went through the course. And at the end of the week on a Friday, they came back together, and the dragons came back to the fire, and the kids shouted those words just to defeat them. And it was just yeah, really exciting for them. And
that's a diverse age range too, right?
yeah, and it worked. I mean,
get their attention. I mean, honestly, to get the attention of a 7-year-old,
yeah,
it's really very hard. But to keep the attention, a 17-year-old is kind of at that age where they drift off, have other interests, but you manage to keep their attention for all of them.
Yeah, they liked it. They were into every part of it, and I think at camp they were, allowed to be kids again. Is kind of the whole story there.
Wow.
And the dragon that I was concerned was the dragon of false dreams, and that was the dragon of drugs, and so that's where my message came in. And because I was an anti-drug crusader from way back, and I used my storytelling in the arts at the schools and stuff, and used a lot of the social issues like that, drug abuse and self-esteem, and so yeah, it kind of all worked out. It was a great program.
It's an amazing program, actually, Tom.
Yeah, and I had these dragon tears. I made up this thing about this dragon swallowing a huge jewel, and every time she wept these tears, and they turned into jewels, and the jewels became talismans against evil. And so they were placed in swords, they were placed in crowns, they were placed in shields.
Right.
And every school I went to, because I use this in schools too, besides just the camp, I gave out these jewels. Kids come up and took one jewel piece, and they took that home with them. And it was kind of like, it was stretching their imagination,
That sounds very interesting. It does.
Yeah. Dragon. That's where Dragonstone came from. The Dragonstone story. Those little stones, those little jewels, and they kids believed in it. They liked it. They were for it.
Wow. Now, illustrations play a significant role in children's books.
Yeah.
And how do you collaborate with illustrators to bring your stories to life visually, or do you not include visualizations?
Oh, I'd love to. I wish I could draw myself. When I was 10 years old, I wrote a story called The Lost World, and I drew all my own pictures. They were stick men. It was such terrible artwork. I still have that book, though.
You do?
I stapled it together and colored all the pictures. But I've been lucky with artists. My first artist was a police artist, and she did sketches of faces. She did people very well.
Oh, really?
And she went on to work for John Walsh of that America's Most Wanted, and she caught a lot of criminals.
Wow.
Yeah, and she believed in my stuff so much that she donated 3 of her covers to me for free.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. She did the scratching on
too many artists that donate their work.
Oh, no kidding. And
honestly,
she did The Kid, the Cop, and the Con, and the Jewel Folk. And then she went on to have a studio. She taught down in Lenexa, Kansas, and she put out 15 books. So it kind of launched her career too to help me. And on she went to bigger and better things.
That's really laudable of her. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and I had a wildlife artist as my next artist. He did pictures of animals really good. And so he was just great. And he did one face, and he nailed it. He just nailed it for my scratching on the 8-ball. And,
really?
Yeah, he was a great artist, Mark Markison. And he did all the murals at the Memorial Hall here in the museum. He did all the backgrounds on that, painted them, and really good. And he didn't charge me anything either.
Really? You had a good relationship with them then, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like a great relationship.
Yeah.
What age group do you primarily write for? And how do you tailor your writing to engage that specific audience?
Well, I had a paradigm done on my books, and I had a professor say I write at an 8th grade level. And I thought, what an insult. And he goes, no, most people read at an 8th grade level. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. He said, so you're nailing it. He says, because 10-year-olds through 70-year-olds can read your stuff and still get something out of it. I'm like, okay. So
Yeah, I never thought of that, but honestly, I guess most people do read in the 8th grade level. The average
yeah, I picture certain kids when I write. I picture them as my target audience, and I gauge what they would think about something, and whether it's corny or cheesy. I can just hear one of them say, "Oh, that's lame." You know? So
you've
so
got you've got cheesy censors, in other words, right?
yeah. And I don't ever criticize when somebody tells me something's not right or something doesn't sound right. I had a scene out of scratching on the 8 ball, and I used the word butthead, and somebody says nobody says butthead anymore. That's coming from Beavis and Butthead. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I better take that out.
Man, I tell you, that's great, actually.
Yeah.
So you tailor your books for your audience, and you have one specific face in mind, right?
I do. I picture this kid all the time. He was my gifted student at Irving, and he and I wrote a computer game together, and we sent it to Electronic Arts, and they offered us $85,000 for it, and 5% of the backing of 4 different formats, and went through 4 different gatekeepers, and the 5th guy shot it down. So,
oh man,
yeah, the computer game never got off the ground. But his name was Drew, and he went on to go to college, and he moved into a house before he moved into his dorm. And that night, the house caught on fire, and he burned and died. And yeah, so I picture him a lot of times when I'm writing, and I think of what he might say about something or what he might think about something. Stop. Hold on. You be quiet. Gotta censor her.
Yep, I know.
So yeah, I kind of have a built-in radar for me with
Yes.
I can and when we used to design the game and the story, we used to start a thought, and I would start a thought and he'd finish it, and it'd be kind of like, wow, that was weird.
He's a very sensitive kid then.
Yeah.
It's too bad he died, though. I mean, honestly, that's terrible.
Yeah, I wrote a great poem about him, and I was able to take his ashes and spread them on Camp Kentucky Lake, the YMCA lake that I met him. That's where I did my drug program, and I was able to put his ashes on the lake. I thought that was pretty cool.
Say that because the environmentalists will get mad. So.
Well, the ashes sparkled that night, I can tell you. It was magical. So.
Are there any particular challenges or rewards you've encountered in writing for children that you'd like to share?
Well, I did a lot of storytelling. I was a storyteller for 9 years with the Arts Council. I got excellent and outstanding ratings. I usually told dragon stories, knights and dragons, and I did a lot of hands-on adventures, a lot of the kids right there in the venture with me, and did a dragon hunt all the time. The teachers loved that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I had special effects all the time. I had my swords. I had lighters on the hilts, and I had flash paper and flash string that went up the blade. And
my gosh, you really got creative on them, huh?
Yeah, and the kids just loved it. I mean, I caught their attention right away, and because they were thinking, "What's this guy going to burn next?" So.
Well, that must be a reward enough in itself to hold the kids' attention.
Yeah.
It's in your storytelling.
Yeah, I think the secret was that I painted images right away. I'm very image driven, and I see things very clearly. And I painted pictures right away that drew them in. And, they've never forgotten that, I don't think, because I've got kids that still write to me this day. They're all adults now. They're grandparents, actually, and and they're like, "Oh, I remember that. There was a girl called Red Sonia, and she had red hair, and I called her Red Sonia, and I called the other one Blue Susan." And so they remembered that. They came to my last book signing. They drove 150 miles from here and drove to my book signing.
Oh,
And
that's really something.
yeah.
50 miles for a book signing? That's
Yeah,
cool.
really. It's cool. So, yeah, I think kids remember what I told them, and got a lot of counselors who later on in life they became teachers and moved on to do better things. And I kind of think maybe some of that was instrumental in what I told them. And
That's got to be reward enough, huh?
yeah.
All right. What advice would you give to aspiring children's books authors who are just starting their writing journey?
I don't know. That's kind of a tough one because I think you got to be in touch with the kids. I think you got to be in that position. Like I said, I spent 45 years in the schools, and I worked with every grade there was, second grade on up. And I think I don't know how I would have done it without being in touch with the kids.
So that's your advice, that they be in touch with kids so they know what a kid expects.
Yeah, because you got to know how a kid thinks, and I don't know. I feel like I've got this memory that doesn't end. I mean, I remember things back when I was 3 years old. I got locked in the trailer, and my mom and dad were outside, and I unlocked the door on them, and we had we had a neighbor guy come over one night, and he wasn't wearing a shirt, and I says, "Mom, Dean needs a bra." I remember those kind of things, and it's like, visuals stuck with me all that time. And I think when you're in touch with your inner child, yeah, you can write for all kinds of kids,
That's good advice, Tom. Now,
Yeah.
let's see. You've got to get Tom's book, Fear Slayers. It's by author Tom Frye. You've got to get that, and his sequel to it, Dragonstone. That's really great too, right?
The Dragonstone. My next one is called Amber Woods, and it's about a hamster that gets flushed down the toilet, and he gets dyed blue by the tidy pole.
You've got quite a vivid imagination, Tom.
Yep.
Would you be interviewing next weekend?
What's that?
Would you mind doing another interview next weekend?
Sure, that's cool.
All right. So I'm signing off for now. And that's a great interview, Tom. I really did appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
All right. Bye.
Bye.